Would you like to create a scene like this and turn it into this? Let's break it down into 5 easy to follow steps to achieve this. Step 1 is sketching. In my case here, I started to create the main shapes with some black line drawings, and I also created this very rough sketch of a human character just for a size comparison with objects in the scene. I started with only a rough idea of what I wanted to achieve, namely a cozy bedroom / home office scene with sunlight coming in from a window. So the first thing to put on screen were the walls of the room, a door on the right and a window on the left, which looked like this. As you can see, I was using a vanishing point perspective with one vanishing point, which is the point where the 2 lines here cross that I had put on a separate layer. And all lines that were going into the depth of the scene were aligned with that one vanishing point to create a nice and convincing overall perspective into the room. Step 2 is basic coloring. This step is good to get an initial feeling for the overall atmosphere and the vibe of the scene. It is not yet the goal here to finalize the colors and to work out the different shapes by using different color values, but just to fill the canvas with colors to help further adding more objects and details later on. With the basic coloring in place, I started to add some foreground objects such as this plant in the corner and the indication of a bed frame being close to the viewer. Step 3 is adding more details to the scene. For example, this little desktop computer under the table, which belongs to the screen, and also an office chair, which I placed in front of the table, as well as a trash bin, and some shelves on the walls to hold some decoration or books later on, a little ceiling lamp, and some more shelves, again using the vanishing point perspective, as well as a clock on the wall, and finally some decoration on the wall, such as books. The door was still kind of just a hole in the wall, so I added a door frame to it. And I applied the same principles to the window on the opposite side of the room. Once I had done that, I went to step 4, which was coloring. So now I really took care of the overall color scheme of the image. I wasn't too happy with the red color values of the carpet that I initially made, so I turned it into some green tone and fine-tuned also the color tone of the furniture, including the wardrobe and the chair, to some more brown, earthy tones, as well as adjusting the colors of the table and the computer. So at this point in the process, I had removed all unused colors so far of the palette, and I started to pick the main colors of the palette that I wanted to keep, and to shift both hue and saturation values of those colors until I was happy with the overall impression that the image gave. So a couple of times in this process I added new colors to the palette and moved it within the palette to some neighboring color where I thought it belonged to, and each time using the remap feature of Aseprite's color palette to shift the indices of the colors back to the objects they belong to. So from here on out I started to add more details to the objects in the scene, starting with the wardrobe. Basically going back to the previous step of adding detail. So following the 5 steps I'm talking about here is not a strict rule. You can always go back and forth between adding more details, shifting the colors until you're happy with the result. Step number 5. The final step then is shading. This is the step where the overall image gets really a boost in overall quality of how it looks. And it is good to have done all the previous steps before so that you don't need to add more objects later on, which again might have an impact on the shading that you created before. Of course, it is still possible to later on add new objects and adjust the shading of the objects that are already there. But in general, it saves time and it's more efficient to have all the things in place before you start with this step. So I was adding shadows, thinking again, where does the light come from? In this case, the light came from the window, and it was basically just natural sunlight that I wanted to simulate here, coming in from the window, falling onto all the objects in the scene. So I expanded the palette with all the main colors I was using at this point to have darker and lighter tones, again placing them in the palette in the correct position. So the table and the wardrobe and the chair and all the other objects got some nice shading to them. And in this case I was also now in this step removing all the black outlines that I had created in the sketching phase of the image. This is more a style decision. You can of course just leave all the black outlines, or you can choose to leave outlines that are visible but then use a darker version of the main color of the object in question. In this case I did this only in some parts, whenever the shading made sense to do this. But in general I was removing all the outlines that I created before in the sketching phase. For the rectangular object on the wall, I wasn't sure for a while if this should become a poster or some kind of picture frame. In the end I decided to make it a mirror with some nice reflective highlighting lines in white. And after this was done I went back to the foreground objects, which were still in a rough sketch phase, so I fine-tuned the overall shape of the palm tree or plant in the corner. With the bed frame I was already happy, and the last thing I did was move the overall light on the carpet closer to the window. So this was the final version of the image with a nice little scene in some house, and maybe this is kind of a farmhouse somewhere on some farmland, and maybe at night this farmhouse gets visited by some UFO abducting a cow, and if you want to see how that looks, then watch this video.